Honourable Member for Richmond Hill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to participate in this debate on C8, and I want to first of all indicate that all countries are governed by the national interest, and certainly in Canada's interest, trade is absolutely paramount, given the fact that 80% of our economy really needs access to foreign markets. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are certainly concerned on this side of the House that for the first time in over 30 years, we now have facing trade deficits, which obviously is something that needs to be addressed very quickly. And obviously this particular agreement is only one in a series of what we hope will be agreements, particularly on a multilateral basis, in order to push access, not just for Canadian products, but obviously that helps not only the business, cultural aspects, political aspects in terms of dealing with other countries, Mr. Speaker. There is no question that this agreement gives us an opportunity to begin further inroads. Since 1997, of course, we had the free trade agreement with Israel, but we really need to look at not just Jordan, but in particular, Mr. Speaker, the Greater Arab Free Trade Agreement that Jordan is a member of. Over 18 countries are members of that. That would give us, hopefully down the road, access from the United Arab Emirates all the way to Algeria. It would give us the opportunity to really expand in areas on environment protection. It would deal with areas of communication, areas dealing with forest products, etc. The difficulty, of course, Mr. Speaker, is that this is just one aspect. And I had the privilege in 1997 in July, when I was Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment, to meet with the Minister and with King Abdullah II of Jordan to talk about particularly environmental protection issues. And the King was very clear that he wanted to see more opportunities with Canada, and obviously the development of this agreement will give us opportunities to discuss and promote both environmental protection, labor protection, and other issues with the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. We obviously support on this side of the House sending this bill to committee, and it will, I assume, address a number of the issues that some of the colleagues have raised in the House today. Access in terms of trade is really our lifeblood. And we need to not only be aggressive, looking at what our neighbors are doing. For example, the United States has an agreement with Jordan, but they also are very aggressive in Asia, in the Asia Pacific. We do not have one agreement in the Asia Pacific. We have exploratory discussions right now with India. But the reality is that while the Americans have been moving forward, and even the discussion on an Asia Pacific agreement, we still sit back and have not been aggressive. We're in but the ninth round with Singapore. We're still, of course, dealing with the Korean situation, Mr. Speaker, particularly on the issue of automotive access. But in terms of where the real action is, it is dealing with multilateral agreements. And this is where the United States, the EU, which also has an agreement with Jordan in this case, they are taking a very proactive role. So although this is one step, and we certainly welcome that, there are the larger issues that we need to deal with, and particularly, as I say, looking at the whole issue of the agreement with the Arab Free Trade Zone. That would certainly be a benefit to us. There's no question, Mr. Speaker, that Canadian exports, although they're only 77 million in 2008, still are important in terms of forest products. They're important in terms of some of the agri-food areas, and obviously machinery. But again, that is simply one aspect, and obviously we import only about 15 million as of 2008, but again, it's building those bridges. And this is why this country in particular, given that we have over 85% of our trade with the United States, and given the economic downturn that not only we face, the United States face, and around the world, the impact that does have on the Canadian economy is significant. And if you put all your eggs in one basket, difficulty obviously is when doors close. So we need to have these other areas. And Canadian business has demonstrated, Mr. Speaker, very clearly that it can compete with the best in the world, given the opportunities out there. This is obviously, I think, something which we will continue to push on this side of the House. The elimination of all of the Jordanian non-agricultural tariffs, which currently average around 10%, is again small, but again an example of the need to again promote for Canadian agricultural products, which again we all know are the best in the world. The need to, again, promote and reduce tariff barriers in general means that this country will become much more competitive internationally, and it'll give us, again, a bridge in the Middle East. And Jordan and Israel do have, of course, since the 1994 peace agreement, there is obviously trade going on there, and again, we can continue to promote many of these aspects which I think are important. Colleagues have mentioned the fact that environmental technology, one of the things on climate change, of course, Mr. Speaker, is that Jordan is dealing with significant climate change issues, as other countries, particularly in terms of desertification. And again, Canadian technology, Canadian expertise can be very helpful in terms of dealing with the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. And again, that is something, an opportunity to promote, to expand our environmental goods in that part of the world. I think is important, and hopefully will be a bridge later on for other countries in the Middle East. There's no question, Mr. Speaker, that at this point, Canada is going to be able to take, I think, a leadership role. But again, we need to be able to evaluate in terms of some of the issues that have been raised. I think in terms of textiles, etc., there doesn't seem to be any concern raised in that area. There are obviously, some members have mentioned about what's the nature of the labor agreement, similar to the one that the United States signed with Jordan. And again, at committee, we can certainly look into that. But again, if we look at where Jordan has come, particularly since 2002, coming out of the IMF agreement that they had in terms of their progress on banking, their progress on monetary reform, their progress in many, many sectors. Jordan certainly is a very good partner, I think, for Canada in this region. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that when we are examining those kind of issues, we again want to be able to say to Jordan and to the rest of the world that Canada is open for business. That is obviously going to be a two-way opportunity, both for the Jordanians and for Canadians, but also to be clear that this is simply one aspect, and that Canada continues to, as a lifeblood, in dealing with that trade deficit for the first time in over 30 years, we have got to diversify, and we've got to get our businesses also to line up to compete in that area. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that when we look at areas, going back to the Asia Pacific for a moment, the fact is that the Japanese concluded a free trade agreement with the Philippines. The Japanese concluded a free trade agreement with Mexico, a NAFTA partner. And why that is important, Mr. Speaker, is that the Japanese were able to deal with issues which traditionally on agriculture they always are very protectionist on. And yet with two countries that have a large agricultural aspects, they were able to get an agreement. The fact that we are still toiling away with Korea and still toiling away with Singapore, we need to look at what others are doing. And the Americans, of course, have clearly demonstrated that they see the future there. An ASEAN agreement with the 10 countries of ASEAN will mean that a market of over 590 million people will open up with Australia, with the United States. We have to be there. And therefore, although we support the idea of a bilateral agreement in this case, the much larger picture is the trading blocs that are emerging, the ASEANs, the EUs, dealing with an Asia Pacific. All of those are really, really critical. If we're not there, and if you look at an example like Vietnam, Vietnam is a market which now has a very strong foreign investment provision. They are welcoming Canadian companies like Manulife that are there. But again, we are missing the boat when we are not developing these kind of strong free trade agreements. And I say again, because Vietnam is part of the ASEAN group, again, we need to have that. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that as time is ticking down until after question period, I want to point out that, again, these kind of agreements will benefit Canadian manufacturers and Canadian labor. It will benefit many opportunities where we can, in fact, expand. And I hopefully will add a little to that, Mr. Speaker, after QP. Thank you.